Hello, welcome to the September 1st, 2023 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'll be the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which level of Cubase it is, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version numbers, such as 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, and also which operating system, that information is helpful. We'll try to go through all the questions that are asked chronologically in the chat. So, and we may be behind as the live stream goes on, and then we'll try to go through chronologically and get to each and every question. And so if you don't get an immediate response to your question, if we could perhaps not try not to repeat the same question over and over again, because that would just kind of slow down the whole process. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan from Stockholm for doing and creating that website. Also, we want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who serve as moderators. So they're not Steinberg employees. They really do this out of the goodness of their hearts. So we want to give a special thanks to them. And also, we want to call out also a special call to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful kind of interactive forum that's wonderful for Steinberg users. And, working with computers. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the primary, which is the United States distributor of Steinberg products, and I'll be the host. I'm presenting from outside of Alexandria, Virginia, in the United States, just outside Washington, D.C., about 10 miles away. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce and tell us where you're from. I'm sorry that we didn't have a live stream on Tuesday. My wife had some issues with her back, and I had to be in the hospital with her for that. So she may be getting back surgery next Tuesday. So keep an eye out for, if you go to youtube.com/Cubase, we may miss next Tuesdays. They're trying to figure out if they may need to do surgery on Tuesday or Thursday for her. So I'd be taking that time off. So if it's Tuesday, we probably won't have a live stream. So I just wanted to give everyone a quick heads up with that. So we may have one live stream next week, probably Friday. But if just kind of look at the YouTube channel, and you'll see if the meeting has been posted. We'll start from there. So, and I just got back from the hospital just maybe an hour or so ago. She's doing well now. So, all right, but let's go ahead and get started. All right, first question is from Ace Amadeus. Hi, Greg. Hope you're doing well. Is it possible to import SYSEX files from old Yamaha hardware into Halion 7? Do I need a special plugin for that? Thanks. All right, so let's see if I think I may have. So if it's going to be like from DX7s and a lot of the FM synths, if we come over here to FM Lab, and this is part of Halion 7, I think if we just click here, so we open up a particular FM Lab patch, this will probably be the default view that you'll see. So let's come over here. So we open this. So to import SysX files from, classic DX7s, if we just click on the oscillator page here, so we can see kind of our operators and carriers, and then click on import, and then you could just direct it to a folder, and then you could import all your classic DX7 and the 6 operator voices directly right here. So we could just come over again and make sure that you're in the synth tab, and as we come over here, you'll see you could just open up the algorithm editor, and then you'll see the import function right there, ACE. So you could just load that up without having to have any additional translation software. All right, so we see just a question, how to make a type beat song for YouTube with WAV and MP3 files without SpectraLayers. So I'm not sure what specifically, just from Yazian, what exactly a type beat song is. So, I mean, if you wanted to make a beat, you could come over and let's just come over here. So if I wanted to, we'll open this up and I'll just go to Beat Designer. And as we go to Beat Designer here, we'll solo this particular track. So as we look at our track, we'll open up the Beat Designer. So if you wanted to, so say, okay, maybe I want to do kick here. And let's put a hand clap. So we can see kind of all the sounds that are in our particular kit here. And say let's put in some triangle. And let's put in just a little bit of hi-hat. And we could add some flams. And let's come over to some bongos, add some percussion. So, but I'm not sure if that's what you specifically mean by type beat, but I mean, it's a beat that you could do. You wouldn't need SpectraLayers for doing that. What SpectraLayers is good at with beats is being able to kind of take a beat apart. So with SpectraLayers, we could take a drum loop and kind of isolate the hi-hats from the kick and snare within the drum loop. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right. So we see a question from Ace Amadeus. Hi, Greg, with Cubase 12 Pro. Can you please show how to enter chords in Retrolog and how to access the area of suggested chords for song in my Mixolydian scale key of D? All right, so let's say we wanted to come here. We will just say, as we want to add a chord track. So really all we would need to do is we could just add chords right here. So let's say we want to be in D Mixolydian. So at this point we can say, okay, I wanted to make it a G chord. And as we go to enter in different chords, so, obviously if we're going to be in D Mixolydian, what you could do is, let's say we have a chord here. It's not necessarily entered in. You don't necessarily enter in chords within Retrolog, but you could have Retrolog follow the particular chord track. And now, so let's say, okay, I wanted to find chords that could go between these two chords. So if we put an undefined chord, which we see represented as an X, like an unknown chord, we could double click on that and go to the chord assistant. And here we could actually see, based on common notes or based on cadences or by musical proximity, So we can say, okay, we're in the key of D, or if we wanted to do circle of fifths, but we could actually have Cubase suggest different chords for us. So we could choose different levels of complexity. So we say, okay, we're here. Maybe I just wanted it to be like a B minor chord, or whatever chord that we want. So let's choose common notes. So let's try an E minor chord. So we could just audition your different chords like that, and Cubase could suggest chords based on particular progressions or musical scales or cadences for you. All right, so we see from Uno Memento, hi from Finland. Do we have a Zoom meetup today? So I wasn't able to get anything scheduled because I just got back maybe an hour before the live stream. But let me know in the comments field if we want to do a makeup Zoom meeting for during next week. I'd be happy to do that. Maybe we could do 2 Zoom meetings this month since we missed the Zoom on Tuesday. So let me know what you want to do, and then we will go from there. So just feel free to, if you wanted to do Zoom meeting next week, that would be, I'd be more than happy to do it. I just didn't get a chance to get it organized for today's live stream. All right, so we see from Lewis says, hello, Greg. Can you please show how to align the grid to the beat of the song and also the metronome to follow the song? Thank you for your support. Okay, so let's just do new project. All right, so I'm going to import an audio file. Say just a quick 2-track. Okay, so let's go ahead and listen to this, and we're going to see that we're not going to have any correlation between the bars and beats and our musical. So I'm going to turn the metronome on. I'll take off the So the metronome has no correlation. All right, so we see no real correlation between the bar and beat. So what we could do to this particular file to get it to align to the grid, so we're going to align the grid to the beat of the song. So I'm going to select the particular file. We'll go to our project, and we will choose tempo detection. So we'll do a quick analysis of it, and now as we listen to it, all right, so, and when you do this, sometimes it is figuring out kind of where the beats are. So it will create the tempo track, and it's going to make this signature track. So, and since it's doing it based on the beat, it's going to put it into a 1/4 meter. So I'm going to say right at this point, I will just activate snap by hitting the letter J. We're going to go to 4/4, so we have like a pickup beat. And we've now kind of done all the tempo detection and aligned it to the grid. And the metronome is now following perfectly along with that. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Lewis. All right, so we see from 315 Christian says he's here early today with plenty of Texas barbecue ribs and wings. So sounds good. All right, and we see a question from 315 Christians. Can you go over the Arpeggiator functions and options? All right, so let's go ahead and jump back to previous file. Okay, so I think I have like a synth bass part here. All right, so there's a lot of the instruments will have their own arpeggiators, but we could also just have MIDI plugins that function as arpeggiators. So I'm going to just play a chord. You can see that we can have our step size. If I want the lengths to match, or let's say I want the length to be like 30-second note lengths. Or let's make it. So at this point we could kind of change the length. We could also just come over here and say, okay, instead of it playing up and down, we could have it go down and then up, or up only. And so I'm just holding a chord. So if I want to go or random, or you could have kind of user based. So now if we wanted to actually, so if I record on this particular track, we can, now at this point, I'm going to hold down just like the chord, and we look at the chord, and at that point, we could see that we're just going to have long notes held. But we could also do a different type of recording where we could record the results of the arpeggiator directly into the MIDI event itself. So as I hit record, so I'm just holding down a chord, and now when we look at the event itself, the event will be the result of the arpeggiation automatically handled right there. Now there's another arpeggiator, so that's kind of the Apache 5. It's kind of a classic, and now we also have the Apache SX, which will allow us to do different transposition and also to drag and drop MIDI events directly into this and use that as the basis for the arpeggiator. So let me know if that's helpful for you. And thanks for the ribs and wings. Sounds good. All right, great to see Jan from Stockholm on. All right, so we have Parabot 2 saying hello to everyone. All right, and we have Razel from Denmark. My brother is actually in Denmark this week. Talked to him today. Thanks for joining us, Razel. All right, and we have Andres checking in from Switzerland. Thanks for joining us. And we have Henrik, also from Denmark. We have Neil Conway saying hello to everyone from Oregon. Thanks for joining us. We have Stefan checking in from Sweden. I see kind words from Neil about my wife's recoveries. I think she'll be good, but we're just making sure we're doing everything we can. Thanks for the kind words, Rick Valentine. Always wonderful to see you on the live streams. All right, and we see Peter from Montreal. Thanks for joining us. All right, always a pleasure to see Sable Winters on. She's like number 14 from the Bay Area. Thanks for the kind words. All right, so we see from Rick Ballantyne, can you go over ways to randomize notes in a quick way? I want to make 4 snares drift a bit to humanize cadences, but not sure how Cubase handles this option and how to set parameters. Okay, so let's say there's a couple different ways to do it. So let's say if you're doing just like an individual part, let's come over. I'll just create just a quick event here. I may actually have just an event, a little drum pattern here. So let's go ahead and all right, so let's say I wanted to come here and all right, so I have like just a quick pattern. So let's say, okay, I wanted to find my snare. I'll just program something real quick just to make it so it's not randomized already. Okay, so let's say I just want to all right, so if we wanted to take like, you know, the drums in general, so if it's on its own track, so let's say this is pretty pretty on a beat, not random at all. If we go to the MIDI modifiers, at this point we could just say I want, and if you don't see the MIDI modifiers here, Rick, what you could do is just right click and make sure that the MIDI modifiers is active. So now we go to the MIDI modifiers and we can say let's randomize the position, and let's just try like 10 ticks. And on playback, and we'll just make this more extreme here. So you could set kind of different random values here. So, you know, start with smaller numbers, like, you know, 20 and minus 20. And then you could change the feel there. Now, if you wanted to, there's another approach if you wanted to do it just in the logical editor. So let's say I wanted to randomize, let's say F#1. So we go to MIDI, and we'll go to our logical editor, we'll go to our setup, and we'll say we want to transform, and we could choose value 1 is going to equal F#1. Okay, and what we want to do to that is go to our position, and we could say set the relative random values between minus 20 and 20. So now we could take our F#1s and just kind of randomize our notes within particular boundaries here. We could also choose to, you know, if we look at our velocity for our hi-hats, we can see that these are all the same velocity. We could also choose to take that and set random values between on velocity. So we'll choose value 2 here and set random values between, let's say 70 and 110. So now I could randomize both the velocity and the position of F#1 notes, or all the notes depending on what you have chosen. So a couple different approaches that you could do with that. You know, for a quick thing, I would maybe, and especially if you had to, if you wanted to only the snare to be randomized, you know, this would be kind of at the track level. And if you wanted only the snare to be randomized, like in your scenario you described, Rick, you know, go to transform, you could choose your snare note, whatever pitch that is. And if you don't know what the pitch number is, if you have this open, just hit the particular note on your MIDI controller, and then that will capture that particular note message, and you could come over here. So we're going to transform F#1 notes, their position between these two values and their velocity between those values. So you could just kind of get randomized results like that. And that would allow you to, if you have multiple notes on a part, you could isolate one particular note to do randomizing with. And so great to see you on the live stream, Rick. Glad you can make it today. All right, so Neil Conway asks, Greg, I read somewhere that my Mo XF6 can work as a DAW controller, etc. Can you demonstrate? So I don't have one, but I think basically how it's going to work is kind of as a Mackie control. So if we go to your studio, to Studio Setup, you want to click on the plus sign to add a device. And as we add a device, you'll see a Mackie control. And what you could do with the Mackie control is you want to make sure that if you have it connected via USB for the Mo X, you probably see there might be multiple MIDI ports, and one of those MIDI ports would be doing the functions for the control layer. So often that's a different port than what you're using for MIDI note messages. And once you have the correct MIDI ports defined here, when you hit the transport, then I believe it's set up as a Mackie control. Yamaha has never sent me one to actually try, but I believe it would function as a Mackie control, and then you define the input and output to the control MIDI ports for your Mo XF, and at that point you could use like the faders to control different if you wanted to control the faders in your mix console, the transport controls, stuff like that, as well as user definable keys to do different functions in Cubase. All right, so we see Filter Freak from Brighton, UK in the house. All right, thanks for joining us. Always wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. So we see from Walter Till, this question is, hi Greg, question about SpectraLayers Pro. Is it somehow possible to process more than one event layer at a time in ARA, especially for post? So I think if we have kind of multiple events here, so let's say I want to take this and let's go ahead and add SpectraLayers. So I'm not sure if you're, so now that we come over, and if we say add event here, that I think if I click, if we have our multiple events here, we could do that. Now, and I think, let's say if we wanted to break down a part here, so, that way if you just click on add events, like as you go to your different events, they will automatically be right there within, or you could choose to remove the events. So you could do it just kind of like that, or if we're doing kind of our processing, if you wanted to do the same processing, like let's say if we did an unmix function, I think the processing would be kind of broken up into different layers. So let's say if I come here to unmix, and we'll say let's unmix drums, where now we could have our different layers. So at that point, I think that if you're doing processing, that this might be, let me just see, that it might be just done one layer at a time for particular processing. But let me know if it's adding multiple events on like different tracks, or if you're just adding, if you wanted to do processing to all of the layers, and if you wanted to do processing across all the layers, you could do that processing maybe before an unmix function. All right. All right, so we see Yazian just saying, Michael Jackson type beat. So, a lot of that would, and thanks for the clarification, but let me know if, like the beat designer, I know like, Teddy Riley, who is Michael Jackson's producer and a lot of his stuff, he's a big fan of the beat designer MIDI plugin, but, you should be able to use that. But let me know if it's like actually kind of creating that particular beat, but, beat designer, like we showed earlier, you could definitely work with that. Yeah, I don't remember Smooth Criminal is how the beat was, but you could definitely kind of program it very easily. I'm sure using Beat Designer, or I can show you one trick if you wanted to do, if you wanted to program drums that, kind of, and I'm just not recalling Smooth Criminal, but let's see if I remember how, like if you wanted to program like kind of a swing feel. So let's say if I'm here, let's say I wanted to do kind of a typical, maybe like a swing feel on a particular event. So let's say, okay, I'm gonna put this into 16th note, I think maybe 8th note triplets. All right, and we'll come over here and let's put in 8th note triplets. All right, and let's put a snare here. So let's take every second pulse in the 8th note triplet. So we'll say triplet, 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 take the middle pulse, and triplet here, and let's move this to our snare. All right, and I'm just gonna do almost like stick drags there. And at this point, like if we take that particular beat and let's just speed it up. Turn off my tempo map here, so let's say so you could often kind of do some stuff like that where you're just kind of taking like your different and it's kind of a, I think, more Bernard Purdy kind of feel if you want. So let's just say we'll put maybe the big snare on 2. So you could do some stuff like that, just kind of taking triplets and then moving the triplets, like the second pulse, to like the snare. So that's some stuff you could do to kind of make different ones. But I'll listen to Smooth Criminal, and maybe on our next live stream, which may be next Friday, then we could show that. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. Okay. All right, so we see a question from Robert Higgins saying, says, greetings from Morro Bay. I've glued some audio together. How do I unglue the files? Okay, so let's say we have audio events here that are now glued together. So I'll come over and let's grab our glue gun here. All right, so once we glue audio events together, it goes from an event to a part. So now I could move all three of those particular events all together as a part. And if we wanted to do kind of like different sample editing, when we double click on it, we have the part editor. So this would allow us to do kind of clip gain and some other functions like that. So if we wanted to get back to our parts, or to have our events, I think if you just go to audio and then say dissolve part, so we'll just come over here and say dissolve part, and then you'll have each of the events kind of automatically done. So try selecting the glued parts and go to audio menu, and so again we will glue these together. Select that, we'll go to project and we'll just say dissolve parts from the audio menu. That would help if we used the right menu. So once again, just come here, dissolve part, and then they'll be unglued. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Wonderful to see Value on the live stream. Okay, so Michael Team says he would go for 2 zooms. All right. All right, Benny is checking in from Sweden. You don't have to apologize for being late, but you did the right thing in hitting the like button. So. Okay, so Zabel could do a Zoom whenever we schedule it, not today though. So maybe we'll aim for next Friday to do a Zoom. That sounds good for everyone. All right, so Michael Teams has informed us that Pablo says hi to everyone. He's gigging today, so. So Elijah Brown says, hey Greg, Undo, not really a silly question, but my dad knows you. So tell me who your dad is. So that's great, and thanks for being on the live stream. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. Get back to where I was. All right. Just looking for my spot. All right. All right, so Tommy C asks, Greg, best way to work with 2 Macs carrying over all my presets and templates, colors, pictures, projects, so I can work seamlessly with 2 computers. Thank you, bro. So the best way to do this, so the project colors are actually carried over within the particular project themselves. When we go to, if you go to the edit menu, if you wanted kind of all the settings to be similar between the 2 programs, or the programs on both of the computers, the easiest way to do that is to go to your edit and go to Profile Manager. And at this point, you could just simply take the settings from one computer, export it, and then import it, and that will be like, all of your presets, your key commands, your macros, all of your plugin presets, your effects chain presets, so just about all the functions. And again, colors are carried over with the project. So once the project is opened in the other computer, those colors are automatically retained, but try to export settings from one of the computers and import that into the other computer, and that will get you like 99% there. All right, wonderful to see Nick on the live stream. Glad you can make it from Essex in the UK. All right. All right, so we see from Teddy just asks, hi, please create a new audio track. All right, so I'll just make a new audio track here. Okay, open the volume lane and create a point and drag it up or down. Volume fader will follow. All right, so we'll see our volume fader here. Create a point, we'll drag it up and down. So volume fader. Now try to undo the volume change, not the point creation. So if you hit Control Z, that looks like it undid the volume creation. Now also, so again, I'll just add this. So let's go to, we're gonna add our audio track. Open it up. I'll create a volume point here. Let's make sure it's at 0 dB. I want to drag this down to minus 8.31. So then it says volume fader will follow, so we see that change there. Try to undo the volume change, not the point creation. So when I undo it there, then the value went back to 0 dB. So that seems to work as expected here. So let me know if I'm doing something different than you. Okay. All right. So we have Carlo checking in from Lagos, Nigeria. Thanks for joining us today. And always great to see Lawrence Koch from Rhode Island. Thanks for being on. All right, and we have Mike Goodman saying hi. So glad he could join us this afternoon. All right, so we see Captain Energy Music just wishing you a nice long weekend. So it's a holiday weekend in the States. My son has today off from school, even. He has a 4-day weekend. All right. Always wonderful to see Kerwin Young from Atlanta. Glad you can make it. Hope you're doing well, buddy. Thank you for the kind words, Michael Teams. All right. All right. Larry B's wishing everyone a happy September 1st. Like, how did it get to be September already? All right. Okay, going through questions. All right, so we see hello from Angola. Hi, Greg. How can we clean out noise in a vocal using SpectraLayers 10? So if you have like the full version of SpectraLayers, what you're able to do is we'll do a new project here just to show this. Alright, so say we have something with a good amount of hiss going on. And if I don't erase it, sorry. Alright, so what you could do in SpectraLayers is we come over here, and what we want to do is just kind of, you know, find, a lot of times we could find, kind of isolate it. And let me just take it off of loop. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of make a selection here. Alright, so I'm going to take that and let's go to process. And this isn't necessarily in with the SpectraLayers 1 that comes with it. But we could now come over and say, so noise reduction, okay, so let's say noise reduction, and we're going to register that as the noise and apply. So now, so once you kind of find kind of the isolated bit of noise, just come here to process, go to noise reduction, register that noise, and then you could just apply that to kind of the whole file to remove the noise. So that way you're kind of taking almost like a noise fingerprint and using that for the basis for the noise removal. So, and obviously the best solution is not to record noise in your vocal if at all possible, but if you're mixing, you sometimes don't have that option. Okay, so we see a question from Lars who says, I started Cubase, but my sound card wasn't connected, so the routing was changed by Cubase to generic sound card of the computer. After restarted my computer, I corrected the routing to audio interface again, but now I cannot pre-listen to the sounds in the media bay anymore, and also my reference track QSend routing doesn't work. So make sure that you, when you did the routing again once the audio interface was set up. So let's say we go to your studio menu to audio connections. All right, so, and this seems counterintuitive at first, but on the outputs, probably set that to not connected. You want to make sure sometimes after doing this, if it's using our audio interface, you may have to turn the control room on, and what you want to do is to add a monitor. And like, let's say in my studio, I have the Yamaha HS7s, and this is where my UR24C audio interface is being sent to. So at this point, if you don't have it configured in the control room for the outputs, then you're not going to be hearing like your Q mixes. You're not going to be hearing the media bay preview. So make sure that you have the it configured in a control room. Sometimes you may have to turn the control room and enable it again. So make sure you're doing that, and you need a stereo output kind of defined, but you don't need to have it connected. And if you have this connected and in the control room connected, it's basically sending the signal out twice. So make sure that you have the audio outputs for your monitors routed through the control room, and I think that will solve the problem for you. Okay, so you see Rick Ballantyne says he loves the logical editor approach to randomizing because you can see it in real time and click to achieve happiness. That's so amazing. Thank you, Greg. So yeah, the logical editor is a wonderful function, and everyone check out Rick's music that he does. He's a wonderful composer. You can check him out online. Always love listening to your pieces that you share on Facebook. All right, so we have question 1. Does the UR44C use 3.1 or 3.1 protocol over the USB-C connection? So it can do either. So if your computer chipset does not support 3.1, it'll work in 3.0 as well. So it'll do both 3.0 and 3.1. It says 2, if I use a USB-C cable to the interface and USB-A 3.0 to USB 3.0 parts will benefit being 3.0 over 2.0, so you might get slightly lower latency, but usually you're not really pushing the bandwidth with the number of inputs for UR44C, but you know, I think there's a lot of people run it as a USB 2 interface and have no problems and aren't aware of it. So you shouldn't have an issue with that. All right, so Nick says 63 watching and 35 likes. Whack the like button. All right. All right, and Kerwin Young's happy to catch in our Friday meetup. It's glad you can make it today. All right. All right, so we see from Mike Weiser, question, does Steinberg have an official page they could check for users dropping new ideas and suggestions for future versions of Cubase? So I think that there is a section on the Steinberg.net forums. Let's take a quick look just to see, but if you ask questions here, all the questions that we have are passed on to Steinberg here as well. So we'll just go to our forums. Let's go to Cubase. And I think if you just put, vote for your most important feature request, that I think if you put like, feature request, if you put like FR in the forums, so, these are monitored as well. So that'd be, so you could do it within the forum. So let's just say, so, here you could vote for a particular feature request as well. So there's a lot of stuff, but I think if you just put, that there might be just a, like tag for, let's say for feature requests. Let's see if it's, and if you want to pass along to me, or if you ask questions here, at that point it will be seen by Steinberg as well. All right. So we just see Walter Till just says, I would like to do multiple layers from events on the same track, especially for a noisy voice. So let me know if you, just doing the add track function that we showed, if that'll work for you, Walter. Okay, so we have a question from Elijah Brown. Greg Undo, where to find effects and analyzer? So, as soon as you go to, let's say your insert, let's say we have an insert effect, so we'll activate this particular project. So if we go to inserts here, you could see all of your available plugins in your system. So anything that's installed, if it's VST3 plugins, it's automatically going to get categorized and automatically loaded up. If you go to your studio menu to VST plugin manager, and if you have VST2 plugins, at this point you could go to the settings, and then you could add a VST2 plugin path. So this way you can say look into this folder and click on rescan, and that will automatically update all of your plugins. And if and the second question is about the analyzer plugin, how to find the analyzer plugin. So if we go to the categories here, you'll see analyzer, and then you could open up supervision, and supervision has just loads of amazing, I think 13 different meters or so you could have multiple meters kind of all going on simultaneously. So if you wanted to just look for, these are all the different metering types that you could have within one particular instance of supervision. So different signal for measurement for loudness, spectral domain, phase, spatial domain, waveforms, and if you know the special trick, you could actually get a game of Pong using supervision. It's kind of a Easter egg feature. All right, so we see Ralph Nelson Tucker is 68, and he just started producing house and hip hop. So that's great. Probably have a lot more experience to share. All right, wonderful to see Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset in the UK. All right, so Alex asks, hey Greg, how can I make Cubase remember my mix console zoom settings between projects? Currently, each time I make a new project, I have to always zoom in the mix console in both length and height a bunch. So if you're starting from a template, the mix zoom settings will always be based upon the project. So if you have, 2 tracks, the zoom settings may be different than if you have 200 tracks. So having the zoom settings is going to be stored at the project level. So what a lot of people, if they want consistency in regards to that and colors and naming schemes, one of the things that you might want to do is to start off with a template. And what a template is kind of a framework for you can take a particular project and just choose to go to your file menu and choose to save as template. And then when you go to a new project, you could just say, okay, I want to go to, this is my template, just double click. And at that point, everything will be consistent. The mix console will be the same size. The zoom will be carried over, but each project will be, just like each project have independent colors. The zoom settings are going to be project based and not globally set because you're going to have different tracks in different projects, different number of tracks, different processing. So that's why it's kind of set up for, and that's kind of the the reasoning behind that. All right, Ralph Nelson Tucker's sending greetings from the UK's smallest county. Well, now that you teased us with that fact, just so that we could get it on America in Jeopardy, you got to reveal what county it is, Ralph. All right. All right, so we have Mark asks, hi, I want to activate my Cubase license on my Mac and activate it on my other PC, but nothing is working. So what you want to do is just come over and you want to go to the, so I'm not sure if it's Cubase 12, which would be under the Steinberg Activation Manager. So once you open this, you can now take your Cubase 12 license and run it on up to 3 different computers. So if you have, a work computer, a home studio computer, a laptop, what you would need to do is to just come over here and make sure that you sign in. So you want to just sign in with your My Steinberg credentials on all of your machines. And then once you have the Steinberg licensing, all you would have to do is just come over here and just choose to, so say I want to activate this, I would just say, okay, let's come over, click on the activate button, and then you could run this particular, activate this license for this computer, and you could do it on 2 other computers as well. So all you have to do is within the Steinberg Steinberg licensing program, the Steinberg Activation Manager, at that point just choose to activate it on your computers, and then you should be able to, it's like kind of signing into like a Gmail account, similar concept. So you just kind of activate the account there, activate the program, and you could have it on up to 3 different computers. Okay. So you see Mark just says, I tried opening the Steinberg download assistant, but it shows an error message which says there's no connection to any servers. The internet connection might not be stable. So make sure that and it says I tried closing my Wi-Fi many times, restarting my Mac, no results at all. So, try doing, not from this Steinberg, check your Steinberg Activation Manager, which is also installed along with Cubase, and see if you see it in there. All right, always wonderful to see Matt Elston checking in from London. Glad you could join us today. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. Let's see if I can go back to where I was. All right, Michael Teams has revealed that he's listening to K-pop at age 70. To a group named Twice. He really likes their production. All right, so Tommy C says, yo, Greg, can you glue events and not make a part, just a connected event? Well, you can think of a part as a connected event, but if we want it like these 3 events here to be one single event, what we could do is just select them. If you go to audio and go to bounce selection and replace, and now it is an event, but all of the different the 3 separate events are now one contiguous event. So maybe you could do a render in place, or just go to audio to bounce selection, and that should allow you to join those without turning it into a part. It would still be an event that way. But if you use a glue tool that's taking individual events and creating a part, that is kind of a container for each of those individual events. All right. So we see Rick Valentine just asking, also, is there an announcement on when the Zooms are, Greg? I would love to join. So we usually do it the last live stream of the month, which would have been Tuesday, but I wasn't able to do a live stream on Tuesday, as explained earlier. So we'll plan for next Friday for a Zoom meetup. So if that works for everyone, and usually what we do is like from, like I started at 1 p.m. US Eastern. So if you're in UK, that's 6 p.m. Central Europe, it's 7 p.m. And if you're on the West Coast of California, 10 a.m. and obviously different times and different time zones. But we go for about 2 hours, and then we will release the Zoom invite within the live stream. So we will plan for next Friday for a Zoom meetup, and I'll have time to get it set up for that. So, but generally, as a rule of thumb, it's the last live stream of the month. So look forward to seeing you hopefully next Friday, Rick. We see Robert Higgins says, thank you for the info on ungluing parts. All right, so Elijah Brown asks, Greg Undo, if you don't mind, would you also be willing to explain on how to do some automation for delay and also the rest of the effects? Okay, so let's say I want to take this particular vocal file here, and I'll just turn this down to a more reasonable tempo. It'll make sense. All right, so I'll take off. All right, so we have, let's say, reverb. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to my send effects for this particular track, and I'm just going to bypass the reverb I have on. Let's add a delay. So I'll just right click, add effects channel. I'll just make it a mono delay. Okay, so now that effect is enabled, so I'm going to set it to like a dotted quarter note. So let's say I want to take the feedback or how many. I started losing sight my place. What dimension am I in? All right, so if I wanted to automate like the delay times here, what we could do is just click on the W and R within the plugin. So let's say I want. All right, and let me just. So let's say. There, let me just sell it only this one particular track. All right, so. Sorry about that. Let me just. So if I wanted to automate like the send levels, I would just click on W on the particular track here. And let's say, okay, while we're doing this, I'm just going to grab the send level here. So this way we could have less of the effect. I started losing sight my place. And let's say if I wanted to automate kind of within a particular plugin, I could now come over here and let's say just click on the W and R within the plugin. So as we so now all my plugin parameters are automated. So if we go back here, listen to this. So we can see just all the different plugin parameters will be automated just like that. So you could automate the send level. So you could just say, okay, I just want to come here to this particular track and automate send levels. Or if you're in the plugin itself, click on the W button and just move whatever parameters, and all of those will be recorded as automation. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Elijah. All right, so we see from Henrik ask, hey Greg, how can you import or move lyrics analyzed by SpectraLayers to Score Editor? All right, so let's come over here. Just find a project that may be good for this. And if you haven't seen this feature, it's pretty cool what SpectraLayers could do with this. All right, so let's say,
do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago. It was 7th grade.
All right, so I'm going to take the lead vocal here. Let's go to add SpectraLayers. We'll get to unmix and choose transcription. And what this is basically doing is breaking out all the, it's doing and just listening to the actual vocal. All right, so now it's almost done with its analysis, and what we look at is we could see here at the bottom that, you know, we could just kind of see the lyrics broken down, and I think what you could do is edit the transcript, right click, and let's go ahead and so we'll just kind of listen to it here.
Oh, I remember the day that we went. Seems like a long, long time ago. And our first kiss, there was no regret. Right after that Garth show.
All right, so now we're going to export this, and we'll do it as just a text file. And I'll put this on my desktop. Okay, so let's, now at this point, let's say if we're in Score Editor, all right, so got it in our Score Editor here, and I think that we could do, let's open up that text file. I think we could do this. All right, so I'm going to copy. All right, I'm just going to put in some silly notes here. All right, so say if this was our lyric, I think at this point, if we go to scores, there is kind of a lyrics from clipboard, and then you can see that the lyrics will just kind of be pasted to the notes. So if you want to add, I think like a dash. So at that point, just once you copy the lyrics, you could just come over here and right click or go to your scores menu to functions and lyrics from clipboard. So if we wanted to look at this in our score editor, so let's say we go to scores and we look at it in page mode, that you could just have the lyrics automatically imported just like that. It's a pretty amazing, cool feature. All right. All right, always wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we see from Teddy, just says, hi Greg, please, when you create the point, immediately drag the volume down in the same click. All right, so let's take a look. I'll add an audio file here. Okay, so I'll add a blank audio track. Okay. All right, so now that when I add the point and drag it down, because there was no point previous to that, it's not going to undo because there isn't an action that was done before that. So it's not, so it'll get rid of the point. But when you do it at the same time, so we'll come here and again look at the audio. So say we have this set to 0 dB. Because you're setting the initial value, that's the initial value. There's nothing to go back to. So when you're kind of setting the initial value, so that's why, and I think if you had like an initial value here of 0 dB at the beginning, and then we add that point, that you could undo it because it's not part of, the very first action that you're doing is setting the value, so there's nothing for it to go back to. So, but if you have kind of an initial value there, then you could go back, so once you have an initial value, as you come over here, we can add the different points, and as we undo each of those, it'll go, but there's no, nothing for it to undo back to once you're kind of setting it up for the initial value. So. Okay, so we see from Israel Ogog, hi Greg, is it possible to overdub MIDI performance in Cubase 12, merging different performances together? Thanks. All right, so let's say I wanted to come here and just put a quick layer. So I'll just, all right, so let's say, all right, so let's say as I record, I'll play a high note. And what you need to do is when you go to the MIDI, so when we go to your MIDI record, and I have this in like cycle mode, we could choose to mix, overlap. So if you wanted to, let's say if I wasn't in, so right now, let's say I'm not in cycle mode and I wanted to just come here, we'll see new parts. I'll say merge. So if I have new parts selected, I come here, I hit a low note. You can see that event is laid over top of the other events. But if I wanted that note to be merged, we would just choose our MIDI record mode here to merge. So as we record, then that's all going to be one contiguous part. So make sure that your MIDI record modes that you could access right here from the transport or from the transport menu, where we see or different MIDI record modes, that you could have that set that to merge right there, and I think that will allow you to do what you want to. All right, great to see Molly Frank checking in from Norway. Thanks for joining us today in the live stream. So we see from Max Head, it just says UADX plugins keep loading CPU and freeze the audio track with it. So I don't have any UAD plugins to check, but if it's not going to, so I assume maybe those are I'm not sure if those are the native plugins or if it's the ones that are running off the DSP accelerators. But generally, if you don't see the behavior with other plugins, it would lead me to think that it's going to be something with the UAD plugins. So, but I don't have any UAD plugins to test with. But see if you get the similar results with other plugins, other third-party plugins, native plugins, like the built-in plugins that come with Cubase, and then we could probably isolate it. But often when you hear stuff like that, it could be down, to the plugin manufacturer to resolve. All right, so we see Gothic Melancholy just says Cubase 13. So I'm sure that, people are working on, they're always working on future versions and future technologies for Cubase. So, but the current version is Cubase 12, but generally Steinberg doesn't announce until the program is released, so that we don't tease our customer base. It's kind of annoying. Okay, reading through comments. So thanks for all the great comments. All right, so we see from Elijah Brown, says question 4, when does the Zoom meeting will begin? So I think we're going to do it next Friday, and we'll start like 2 hours after the live stream starts. So that'll be like 3 p.m. U.S. Eastern time. So look for it next Friday. I'll get it set up. All right, just reading through. Thank you for your thoughts, Elijah. Appreciate that. Still reading through comments, and then my chat field jumped on me. I think it's all a question from Ted Springman. Okay, so we see from Ted Springman in Los Angeles, feature request. Some virtual instrument GUIs are large, contact and cover, toggle button, making it hard to quickly open, close. Would be nice to center the GUI just to the right of button, thanks. So I think the plugins will open in the same spot that they were opened in previously. So let's say if I come over to, like we have the Verve piano here. So let's just come over here. We'll select this track and we'll open up, let's say, the instrument view. I'll just add a new instrument. All right, so let's say if I move this and we'll align it with measure 29 right there. Let's say I go to a different instrument track. So we'll come here, open that. So we can see that. Now let's go back to Pad Shop. And we can see that the position that was opened will be retained. So I'm not, I don't use Contact regularly for my work, but it says, making it hard to quickly open and close, maybe the toggle button. So I'm not sure if it's the overall GUI, if you need to do this. But, sometimes a lot of functions, make sure that, if you're doing on Windows platform, make sure that you're running, in high DPI. That could make a difference as well. But a lot of it could be kind of design decisions within the particular plugin that's kind of outside of our control. But I'll pass it along regardless. All right, wonderful to see Braxel checking in from Texas. Okay, so Ralph has supplied our trivia answers. So the smallest county in the UK is Rutland in the Midlands. Sounds like a good future trivia question. All right. So thanks for sharing that bit of information, Ralph. Okay, so we see from Alex, it says, hey, Greg, just follow up in the mix console Zoom thing. The problem is using a template. If I do that when I import MIDI, I can't make Cubase import the tempo track without making a new project first. I guess that wouldn't be a problem. If there's a way to, when importing a MIDI file from the client, I can import the tempo track data without having to create a new project first. So one preference that may kind of help with this is if you go to your preferences and we come over to preferences to MIDI file, and then you'll see on import that make sure that you don't have ignore master track events on merge. So you could try that and just so we go to your ignore master track. So I'll give it a try though. So let's say we'll do new project here. All right, so I'm just going to add an instrument track. Let's create some MIDI data here. So now and let's add tempo data. So we'll come over here to our tempo track. All right, so we're going to export this as a MIDI file. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to, let's go to a new project, and we will choose our template. We'll come over here to production. Let's say maybe. All right, so I do this template. Okay, so now I want to import that MIDI file. All right, and we'll say, do we want to create a new project? And we'll say no. And we'll go to our desktop. That is where I saved it to. All right, I'll just check my desktop again quickly here. All right, let me just go back to our project, and we'll make sure that we exported it to the right spot. Okay, let me just put it to. Okay, so let's go back to this template. And now let's go ahead and import our MIDI file. We don't want to create it. All right, so now we have this. Let me import it while it's active. Okay, so we see our pad shot part, and let's add a tempo track. And the tempo is automatically imported. So the tempo does import with the MIDI file. Just make sure that when you go to your preferences, the default state is ignore master track events on merge. Try to just uncheck that. But MIDI files will carry over the tempo once that's done. So the tempo information will be carried over from the MIDI file when working with templates. So let me know if that makes sense, Alex. So we see from, I believe it's, this is Greg, MSP7 is discontinued, MSP5 Studio is discontinued or still being done. So I believe that both of those are discontinued. So, I know like the HS, you have HS5, 7, and 8 are the current Yamaha Studio monitoring offers. I think the MSP7 was, maybe done like 2008. 2009, something like that. So see, Ralph Nelson Tucker just says old Cubasers never die, they just automate the fade out of their cutoff. It's well said. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. How can you optimize the audio performance of the ASIO Guard using 10 tracks, audio, and 2x VST instruments, no plugins, and it's peaking around 35 to 40% on an M2 or a PC? So you realize that the when we go to your performance meter, you'll see kind of, and I'll just set up kind of a similar scenario. So let's say. The ASIO Guard meter, so you have kind of real-time processing and ASIO Guard processing. So if we have a number of tracks that are record enabled, so let's say if I'm here, let me just set all of my routing here to an input bus. All right, so just hold down Alt plus Shift, and we'll just set it to okay. So as we come over here, and when we see the ASIO Guard meter, that means, there's two different types of audio performance meters. So there's ASIO Guard, and those are tracks that are physically armed for record. So you may notice that, as we come over, if we arm a whole slew of tracks, that the ASIO Guard may creep up a little bit. But there's certain audio, like for lower latency operations, like where you're playing a virtual instrument in real time. Once that particular instrument is playing, that is going to go into the ASIO Guard because it needs to look ahead for all of the signal processing, whereas tracks that are playing back, that kind of shows you the real-time performance. So just because you see the ASIO Guard creeping up, it could be just that you have those tracks kind of record enabled or monitored, where it needs to run kind of lower. It needs to run the latency lower, and tracks that are playing back, we can see this indicated in the real-time performance. And what happens is when tracks are record enabled, those particular tracks, and I think record and maybe monitored enabled, those particular tracks will actually run at the lower latency, and other tracks that aren't record enabled are running at a higher latency. So it's kind of a hybrid buffering system. So tracks that are running that are record enabled, that will affect the ASIO guard meter. So try just if the tracks are record enabled, turn that off, and you'll probably see that the meter will go down. So the ASIO guard is indicating which tracks need to have lower latency for tracking and monitoring. And the real time is tracks that aren't actually activated for record or monitoring. So it's really just kind of a balance between those two. And obviously, raising the buffer size, if you're running at 32 samples, with your audio interface, adjusting your buffer size, raising the buffer size will make the performance increase, or raising the buffer size will give you more headroom so that you could have more performance on your system, and lowering the buffer size makes your computer work harder. All right, reading through comments. And we see Elijah just wishing everyone sending positive thoughts to people that were affected by the hurricane that kind of hit through Florida and the southeast in the United States. All right, so we have Kai Wen Franklin just saying hello to everyone. Glad to see you back on the live streams. All right, so we see Vent says people must learn Cubase if they want to be in the industry. That's a good comment. All right, so we see just a question from Ted Springman. Looking for a fast way to change audio routing and effects for many virtual instruments, and wondering if I could easily drag them into a group folder with this already set up as desired. So, dragging, the folders that we have. So let's say we have a number of tracks here. We have all of our audio tracks into a folder, but we could also have MIDI tracks, which doesn't have necessarily a correlation to audio. Often it will with a virtual instrument, or let's say in here we could have our audio track set to, let's say to, a ruler track, or we could have a video track. So, not all tracks that are within a folder are set. We have an effects channel track, are designed to output audio. So let's say I wanted to add a transpose track. So just dropping something into a folder, I don't think it makes sense to automatically, have that, apply the routing. But, if you wanted to, let's say if we go, we have a number of tracks here. So let's say I wanted to take these tracks and I'm going to hold down like Alt Shift and send them to group 1. So now that I've done that, I selected all those particular tracks. I could just hold down Alt or Option plus the Shift key and set the routing for all of them just at once. You could also come over here and say, okay, I want to take the output of all of these tracks, And if you had a project logical editor, if you know that you're going to particular destinations, at this point we go to the project logical editor. You go to setup and say, okay, I want to take transform, and we'll say container type is equal to track, and we'll say that the property is set to that the track is selected, and I want to come over here and let's say track operation, and then we could say connect output. So I could say, okay, I want all these tracks going to group 5 or whatever. So now at this point I could just take the selected tracks, and all the selected tracks can be routed to particular destinations. But a lot of people miss holding down the Alt option plus Shift, and all selected tracks. Once you change one, those settings will be applied to all of them, as opposed to dragging it into a folder. Because a lot of times you may want the folder to have tracks that are being routed to different destinations. So. All right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions and great discussions. If you've learned something, new tip or trick, make sure that you actually hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. We see that Nick has had a long day, so thanks for joining us on your long day. I hope you're well. Wonderful to see Michael Pierce on the live stream. Glad you could make it today. All right, we have Chris Hallam checking in from Franklin, Tennessee. So hope you're enjoying Franklin. Trying to remember the cool little coffee shop that was in Franklin. It's like the Frothy Monkey or something. Go there if you're a coffee guy. Okay, so you see a question from Matt Elston. Greg, please, Cubase 12 Pro, Windows 11. I have a track with multiple tracks using Halion Sonic SE and audio tracks. I'm finding that the chord track is set to monitor tracks, and this works as it should. See next message. All right. However, the Halion track I'm working on is not monitored and is switched off in the chord track checkboxes. In the track side menu, but is still playing, although if I change the chord track and if I change the chord track to act on one other track only in a project, it stops. And then let me just sorry, okay. I would try all right, I'll just start this. Sorry, kind of my system, my text jumped. All right, so I have a track with multiple tracks using Halion Sonic SE and audio tracks. All right, so let me just kind of create that scenario here real quick. I'll just create a new project. Here, I'll just do this empty. All right, so we'll add a chord track. Let's add a couple of instrument tracks here. So we'll do just Italian sonic. Let's add 4 of them. Okay, so let's say we wanted to have maybe piano on 1. And let's come over here, let's add an organ. And let's add maybe synth kind of sound here. All right, we'll add one more instrument. Let's say maybe like an FM. All right, so we have different instruments. Let's add a couple of audio tracks as well. We'll get this created. Okay. Okay, so we have our chord track. So let's say now at this point, okay, so we'll say use monitor tracks. Set this in a quick loop. Okay, so let's read through Matt's question. All right, so I have a track of multiple tracks using high and sonic SE and audio tracks. I'm finding the chord track is set to monitor tracks, and this works as it should. However, the howling track I'm working on is not monitored and is switched off in the chord checkboxes in the track side menu, but it's still playing, although if I change the chord track, to act on one other track in the project, it stops the unmonitored howling track from producing output like it was monitoring the chord track. Help, please. Okay, so let's say we have this, and I'll just label these again real quick. So say FM piano, and this is going to be our let's do synth. to synth for now. Okay, so sorry for messing up earlier. All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so it says, okay, so using multiple tracks and finding out the chord track is set to monitored tracks, and this works as it should. See next message. However, the howling track I'm working on is not monitored and is switched off in the chord track. Check boxes in the track menu, but still is playing. If I change the chord track, to activate one on the track in a project, it stops the unmonitored howling tracks from producing. So I think that what we have, so, you know, I think that we could have one of these set at a time, you know, so it's, so if I'm understanding, so say I only want this to go to, so say now I wanted to go to the organ sound. And let's say I wanted to go to the piano sound here. So next chord. Now if I want it to be across multiple tracks, when I come here. So let's say I want to take the piano out to the next chord. So I'm not sure if you're trying to get multiple ones of this. So in track only in a project, the howling track from producing output, like it was monitoring the chord track. So I think, you know, if I'm understanding correctly, Matt, and let me know if I'm not, that we could have it go to a single destination if you wanted to. So if you say, okay, now I want only the synth pad, and we have this one muted, but if I wanted it to go to, you know, all of, like I wanted to go to the Rhodes, the organ, and the piano, that I could just say use monitor tracks. So now that we have the Rhodes organ, that will now kind of play back through all of those different sounds. And then if I chose to only go to the synth, so if you're, I think what you're trying to do is maybe set these up to output to multiple, but these would be kind of a single destination, and we could at this point, you know, if you wanted to go to multiple destination, that's when you could use the monitored tracks options. So let me know if I understood correctly. Sorry about that. And thanks for being diligent and typing across multiple messages. All right, so we have Mutlu checking in from Istanbul. So thanks for joining us today. Great to see you on the live stream. All right, Mutlu has a question. Can we save VST instruments that we always open as favorites? So, you know, a lot of people would save it within a particular template, but let's say, okay, I really like this particular organ sound. So let's say, okay, I want to use that. We'll call it my go-to organ. So all right, so what we could do now is right click and you could save as track preset. So we'll say, you know, my fave organ. All right, so we'll just come over here, hit OK, and then if you just go to presets, to track presets, to VST instruments, or let's say we go back, we say user presets, and let's say track presets to VST instruments. You could just see my fave organ and just drag and drop, and then load that up, or just double click and open up that organ sound to play. So you could just kind of save, like all the settings that you've done, and just save it as a track preset or save it within a template. A lot of people do that, especially like film and TV composers, so that they could have access to all of their kind of known favorite sounds, and they save it into template, and they go, oh, this is my oboe, this is my glockenspiel, this is my pad, this is, this synth lead sound, and you could just have quick access to all your favorite instruments right there. So let me know if that's helpful. So we see Neil Conway asking, does anyone use Dante? VE Pro seems cool, but was going to chain the stack of Macs with Dante. So, you don't really necessarily, I think they're slightly different. So we could have Dante, and you could have multiple audio devices running, over an Ethernet connection. But what I don't think Dante does in comparison to VE Pro is to necessarily host instruments. So you could have instruments there, but you may not be able to get MIDI from computer A to computer B, C, or D. Over Dante. So I think they're going to be kind of slightly different. But if you wanted to say, oh, now I have, if you're doing like, a large sound installation where it's like, okay, like I saw a concert last month, and, like if you went to the restroom, the concert sound was being piped into the restroom. And so like the front of house mix was being piped to various areas. And this is kind of at a contemporary casino concert hall. So if you go out onto the floor, you could hear the concert going in to sell additional tickets and stuff like that. So Dante is really good at distributing the audio, but I'm not sure if it's really designed to host VST instruments and transmit the MIDI information to and from. So. All right, so we see question, is there any Cubase 12.5 going to be released before 13, or are we going straight to 13? Thanks. So I think that Steinberg announced when it went from 11 to 12 that there weren't going to be 0.5 options. So I could speculate that maybe it would be going straight from 12 to 13. So, and usually when they did 9 to 9.5, 9.5 to 10, it was the same amount of features that were being updated, and a lot of people may have dismissed it because, oh, it's just a 0.5 update, but it's a 0.5 update with 300 new features. So I think they're just using, they're not going to be using the 0.5 model set. Gerald Ely says, version 13, I haven't learned everything about 12. So, me either. All right, so we see Uno Memento asks, how can I make a chord track from a strumming guitar / audio track? All right, so let's come over here. I think I have a good example in this project. All right, so I have a chord track active within the project itself. And what I want to do, so if we scroll up here, we can see chord track. Is we can just come over here and say, okay, let's go to our guitar part. So we'll listen to our guitar. So this track, and I'm just going to drag it to the chord track, and it's going to do its analysis, and it's laid out all of the chord changes for us kind of auto magically. So we could just come right over here and see all the, so just drag it to a chord track. You could also have the track selected, go to your project menu to chord track and say, create chord events, and then kind of do the same exact process. You always feel cooler dragging the event into the chord track though. So. Okay. All right, so we have Dwight Cunningham checking in from the Bahamas. Just saying thanks for your help. All right. All right, so we see, Greg, is it possible to demonstrate layering MIDI VST instruments on one track in drums in loop record mode? Yeah, so let's go ahead and take a look. Do that. So let's go to this project here. All right, and I'll just revert the project as I'm sure I've destroyed it pretty well. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. Okay, so let's come over here. We have let's say we want to do just quick. Okay, so I'm going to set my MIDI mode here to merge. So if you want to do it like in cycle, and if we wanted to, we could just say, okay, I want to do stacked. So we could do like mix stacked, no mute. So at this point, if I'm going along, let me just turn on my click track, hit C. So we'll start off with a So you could do just kind of build beats just like that, and then if you wanted to edit each individual one, you can just, as we select the particular events here, you could just open up the lanes, and that way you could, or if you wanted to see all this. Hang on one second, my son just popped in. All right, sorry about that. All right, so Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. All right, so you see, hey Greg, man, it's from Alex. That MIDI tempo import issue is literally plaguing me for years, since like Cubase 5 or something. This entire time it was that simple. Thank you so much. Using template it is. Yeah, so sometimes what would happen is, as a lot of drum instrument plugins, like a lot of drum, like where you get like MIDI loops of drums, people would drag it in, and then with that checked, it would automatically revert to the original tempo and change the tempo in their project. So that's why it's kind of off by default. But we're glad it's you're one mouse click away from happiness. All right, so you see from Elijah Brown, just says, hey Greg, has a nice team, totally thinking of purchasing Cubase for yourself right about now. Currently using an unknown digital audio workstation called N9 Track Studio. Probably won't know. So we'd love to have you in the Cubase family, Elijah, and we will be happy to kind of help you along your Cubase journey on the live streams here. All right, so we see, I think it's from Marcos. It's because the HS are great, but as I know, the MSP are premium line, not. So I think probably of the speakers, maybe the MSP 7 was the premium line, but that was compared to, you used to have the HS 50 to HS 70, HS 80, and I think a lot of the technologies from the MSP have kind of translated into the HS, the later editions of the HS5, HS7, and HS8. So, because they did come out, years before, it may not be a total fair comparison, but I think, obviously there's, I think the most popular studio speakers are the Yamaha HS, and I always like the HS7 is kind of a really nice sweet spot. So. All right, so we see question, any news about the new version? So, generally we don't, Steinberg as a rule of thumb doesn't announce new versions until it's released. So, but always know that, the team is working on stuff. Right, All right, so we see from Claudio asks, hi, what's the purpose of the VSTI tab? Since I already have access to the software instruments in each track, thank you. So, it used to be kind of, if you wanted to immediately change or to select different areas, but let's say you also have, you wanted to change the name of instruments. So let's say you have 6 instruments that say Hallian Sonic, and you go, oh, this one I want to call, piano, so that when I open it up that you could actually customize the name. This also allows you to, determine the various quick control settings for each of these, and to see, what instruments overall are being used in a project. So, you can see, because sometimes you may have a track here that, or you may have instruments that aren't assigned to any track. So that's why you could see it in 2 different places, because you could load up a heavy instrument and then let's say, you change the instrument on that, an instrument may still, depending how it was loaded, may still be resident, and you may not be aware of that unless you actually do see it in an instrument rack. And this also kind of follows the traditional paradigm of like a rack of sound modules that you would have access to in your studio. Like, if we think 90s, before VST instruments kind of eradicated that whole paradigm. Okay, so we see, does Cubase have an option to edit video? So it's very rudimentary editing, so it's not intended to be a video editor. So, you know, we'll make that, you know, perfectly clear. But if we have a video file in your project, and sometimes you may, you know, be working on a video and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I just really need to, you know, cut the video here. So I need to do, let's say, a global cut of all of, you know, everything in this bit of information. So if I come over here and I could delete that with the video, or we could hold down control or command plus shift X, or just control or control command plus X. And then I can say I need to get rid of the video and all of the audio within that particular time frame. So we could just delete everything within a specified cycle. So if you do get a video edit from, you know, the video side, you can make a quick edit without having to download a new video edit and, you know, deal with all of that type of stuff. So but it's intended for, like, I could cut the video, but it's not going to do dissolves and transitions and color correction. It's not its intention. All right. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we have a question. How is post and pre-send used in Cubase? Okay, so let's take a listen. I think we have like a video file here. Let me just remove this track. So let's say, like I have, let's say I'll just solo this track here.
I started losing sight my place.
All right, so let's say as we're doing,
I started losing sight.
all right, let me just, okay, so when we want to do pre and post on send effects, so we'll just come over here.
I started losing sight my place.
All right, so we're going to open up this particular channel, and so we have our effect send, and right now we could right click, and then we could actually just pick and choose whether we want it to be pre or post fader. So let me just make sure I'm reading the question right. All right. Okay, post and pre-send. All right, so there's pre-fader and post-fader. So right now, if we're listening to our audio and we're playing, I adjust, let's come over here, I'll just add more reverb to it. And I'll just make it kind of a obnoxiously large haw. Okay.
I started losing sight my place.
All right, so now when I adjust the fader down, we could hear how the fader is affecting the gain structure of the track going into, so let's say we come here, so if this fader is down,
in the end,
that's not really feeding.
where is my way there yet?
But now if we move it to pre-fader, when I bring the fader down, the level of the effect will be the same. So we can just come here. So now we're only hearing the effect. And I could bring it. So the fader level, when it's in pre-fader, is not adjust. The level going to descend is not affected by the level of the fader. But if we switch this to post-fader, as this level is changed, the amount of the effect going, to the send is altered by the level. So pre-fader is not, the effect sends aren't going to be changed in any way via the level of the fader, but post fader, you know, if we have very low level, that's sending less signal into the send. If we have a lot of level, like, you know, +6 or +12, that is sending +6 or +12 into the send. So that's kind of the difference. So if you wanted to have the same effect levels regardless of the send via automation, you could just use pre-fader. If you want that to be to have an impact on the gain structure of the effect send, you could send it to post-fader. All right, so we see wonderful to see Nick Saya on. Says, "Hi Greg. Sometimes I use chord pads to trigger my chord progressions. I have always this little issue where there are these notes I didn't play that get recorded. Any fix?" All right, so let's take a look. All right, so say we have a chord track here, or I guess it's chord pads rather. Sorry. So let's come over to our Rhodes, and let's say I'm doing my chord pads here. All right, I'll just do some new project here quickly. All right, so let's say I'm going to be here. Let's record. Take it out of loop mode here. All right, so we look at, we can see kind of the chord voicing here. So as we all right. So we kind of look at this. But that seems like it's outputting the chords. But let's see also if we go to the chords and go to the chord voicings on this particular track. So, I mean, it looks like it recorded, but check also like in the chord voicings. It doesn't look like it's available here, but let me just, check to see if the chord voicings may be having an effect on that, but it looked like that kind of recorded as expected for me here. Like as we look at what chords are being and we look at this in our editor, that, looks, and we'll just kind of zoom in here. So it looks like kind of the same chord progressions to me, but let me know if I did anything differently than you did, Nick. All right, wonderful to see Spike Williams from Rondo, Wales, Rondo Valley. Thanks for joining us today. So we see question, is there a command I can use to vary the downbeats of notes after recording the chords within a chord track? I like to always keep the highest note and lowest note on a grid though. Alright, so let's say I'll just quantize these here, and we just put it to whole notes. Okay, so so let's go to our logical editor. All right, so we want to transform, type is equal to notes, and let's set our context variable is going to be equal to okay, so let's say I'm going to choose actually unequal to lowest note, and context variable highest note, and okay, let's make this equal here, and we'll do highest pitch and lowest pitch. Okay, so we could kind of set up different conditions. So let's say, or we could do position in the chord chart. So let's say, okay, I want to context. Okay, so let's say we want to take notes, and let's say I want it to be the thirds and fifths. So I'm going to say position within the chord, and we'll say, okay, I want this to be the fifth. And we'll do context variable, and we'll choose position in the chord. And let's choose like a minor third, and let's do a major third as well. So context variable. So let's try major third, and what we want to do is position, and then we could set random values, and let's say 5, we'll say -5 and 5. So let's see if that will do the trick for us. Okay, so I'm going to say or for these. And I'll make this just a larger number here. So we can see that only the thirds and fifths are randomizing the position within this amount. So you want to say transform notes, context variable, position in the chord. Within the chord is a perfect fifth or minor third, major third. And those notes will change within, and you can set it to set random values between different variations here. So say -10 and 10. So I'll just select this and quantize everything. So now as we run this, we can just randomize the positions of thirds and fifths within chords if you wanted to, just the start position. So give that a try, Nick. All right, so Neil Conway asks, okay, if I were to put an effects track as a send from other channels, and I were to mark it inactive effects to halt the plugins from taking resource, would it still pass through to its destination? Okay, so let's give it a shot here quickly. All right, so let's say we have this going to.
Na 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 na.
All right, so let's say we have that effect going through, the vocals going through an effect. So if I were to put an effects track as a send from other channels and were to mark it inactive effects to halt the plugin from taking resources, would audio still pass through to its destination? So yeah, I believe so. So let's go ahead, and so I'll just come here, and I don't think we could. So let's just come over to this particular track, and let's say I just deactivate the effects return channel. It's still passing through, and then as soon as this is turned on, then it will work. So let me know if that's how you're, just to mark it inactive. So, but, let me know if that's how you're doing it, but it would still pass through the end source, just not with the effects, obviously. Okay, so we have a question from Ervis Fortuna. How can I change the black color of the key editor page? I want it white because there are problems with my eyes. Dankeschön. All right. So if we're in the key editor and we want a light background, what we can do is just come over to your preferences, go to your preferences menu, and you'll see color scheme. And then we can say editor area background. So at this point we could just say, okay, I want to make it more vertical here. So say I want this to be white. I hit OK, and then my editor background or the project area background could all be changed to accommodate. So again, preferences to color schemes under user interface, and then you'll see project area background, editor area background. And then you could customize them how you want. All right. So you see for Alex, hey Greg, follow up on the MIDI tempo import. So an issue I'm running into, I don't want to always import the tempo track. Sometimes the tempo info in a track is incorrect. How do I go about that? So if you don't want to import the tempo track, just go to the preference, and on the MIDI files here, just choose to ignore the master track tempo before you import it, and that will ignore it. So, but yeah, sometimes, people will just, if they're doing all audio, will just have the tempo at 120 beats a minute. And then it's like, oh, it has nothing to do with the tempo of the actual recorded audio or of the project. So, but you could just go to that preference and enable that preference. Again, we go to your preferences, to MIDI, and to MIDI file, and then just tell it to ignore the master track events. All right, so you just see a question. It says, hello, activation key. So, yeah, so, you'll get an activation key when you purchase your license from your dealer or from the Steinberg online shop. All right, so we see Cubase 12, how much RAM does it need? So a lot of people run it on 16 gigs. If you're doing a lot of, could really vary the RAM requirements can vary depending on what type of projects you're doing. So if you're, doing, recording, 32 tracks of audio, RAM isn't as critical as if you're doing a 3,000 track orchestral template. And for that, you'd probably want like 128 gigs. But a lot of people run on 16. You realize that your operating system can take a good amount of that 16 gigs of RAM. A lot of people, I think, are kind of starting at 32 gigs is a great place to be, I think. And if you're doing a lot of heavy-duty orchestral stuff, go up to 64 or 128 if you have the capabilities to do that. All right, so we see Learn with Steven says, great tip on the track presets. Thanks. See, Michael Pierce just says, sat in a fancy London club this morning. Friend doing sound, massive Dante rig, all parallel to analog in case something goes wrong. Their server room was immaculate. So, yeah, for a lot of like facilities, and live sound stuff, Dante is a wonderful solution for that. Hasn't kind of been as embraced in the studio environment, but for live sound, especially if you're trying to get audio from a stage to the console into speakers now. Running like snakes is, are incredibly heavy to move and transport. Now you can do everything over like, 1 or 2 Ethernet cables. So it's been a wonderful blessing for the live sound industry. And according to Michael Pierce, the kitchen even smelt better. So that's good. All right, so Mutlu asks, can we make a favorites list where you can see different VST instruments, like track instruments or rack instruments? It's not like recording instrument presets. Thank you. So, if it's a track instrument or a rack instrument, but one thing, so if you wanted to have like a favorites list of your plugins, what you could do is just come over to, let's say you go to your studio and go to VST plugin manager, and you could make a new plugin collection. So I'm going to come over here. Let's create. So I'm going to just make an empty. So we'll call this Club Cubase live stream. All right, and here what I want to do is to, so we'll have this as, or let me just, okay, let me just mess that up. So we're going to click here, and we'll do a new collection. So I'm going to make an empty collection, and here we'll call this Club Cubase live stream. Okay, so I'm going to make a new folder. So I'm going to come over here and say these are my favorite plugins. And I think if we just all right, so let me just, okay, so we're going to right click here and create folder, and we'll call it favorites. And what I'm going to do is just come over here and put them into my favorites folder. Now what you could also do is, let's call these instead of favorites, we want to create a folder, and we'll call it others. And let's say I really okay, so at this point I want to take all of these plugins and put it into my others folder, and I want to take these plugins, my favorite instruments, and put them here. So now when I go to add a VST instrument or add a plugin, so say we add an effects channel track or an instrument, that we'll just come over here and I could see my favorites laid out for me here. Or we could just put them into, you know, folders. We could collapse the folders, and you could organize your different plugin presets kind of as you want. So, you know, go to, if you wanted to only see particular favorite ones, you know, go to your studio, to VST plugin manager. You know, at this point you can make a new collection, and then you could, you know, right click to add folders, and, you know, and organize the plugins for your favorites or not favorites, or, you know, creative, or, you know, beats, whatever organization folders you want to create. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see Sable Winters says not Cubase but Wavelab, 10 elements, Master Rig. I've created EQ, saturation, imager. What's the best order? And so, you know, I would say that, and we'll just go ahead and show this. We'll open up Wavelab here. So let's say if we come over here and we wanted to use the master rig here. So, and this is kind of a whole kind of compendium of a collection of different processes where you can say, okay, now I wanted, you know, a limiter. I wanted to come over here and let's have a compressor. I wanted to have, you know, all sorts of different processing. So, you know, generally in this scenario like this, you know, like, you know, maybe a limiter after the imager. Some people may do the imager last. There's really no set order, you know, whatever sounds good. And, you know, and it's easy enough to experiment. So you could just kind of drag and change the order, you know, because sometimes if you're running a limiter into another plugin, it could affect the gain structure, or if the limiter is always after everything, you know, like you may not adjust gain here. So there's no real perfect order, you know, it's just kind of whatever works for your system. If it sounds good, it's good, you know. So, and, you know, start by using, you know, some of the presets that are included with Master Rigs. There's a lot of great presets in there as well, and then you could kind of tweak those for your particular project. Sable. All right, so we see from Kai Wynn Franklin wondering if the next Cubase will have some form of AI in it. So we'll have to see. There's probably, you know, you could arguably say that, you know, there's a lot of AI in it already with the chord tracks and being able to, you know, take your MIDI information, turn it into notation, be able to, you know, there's all sorts of, and if you get into SpectraLayers as well, so there's all sorts of great stuff that you could work with. So there's a lot of stuff that arguably could be AI, but we'll see what's in the next version of Cubase when it's released. All right. All right, so a question. Why does the CPU monitor on Cubase show something different than the Windows Task Manager? I'm at Cubase 10.5. No idea if this has been updated in newer versions. Realize that your CPU monitor and audio performance are two separate, completely different things. So, a lot of times, they are, what you're looking at when you go to the audio performance meter isn't how the CPUs are being utilized, but, how the real-time audio performance is working. So that's why it's going to show different things, because they are completely different functions. They're trying. This is a more accurate way of showing, because how digital audio workstations and other programs scale across, how plugins scale across, how your projects are set up. Like if you have one project that has one track that has 16 heavy plugins, that may take down your entire audio performance. But you look at it on your CPU performance, like, why isn't Cubase using all of my other cores? And it's just because one track can only be sent to one processing core. So the two different meters are really different, and that's why you'll see different results. Your CPU performance is different than your real-time audio performance. All right. All right, so Sable's second question, what's best, tape or tube for R&B vocal solo, and what's the purpose of the imager? So when you're, dealing with saturation, it's really, it could be, both of them may sound great on your particular scenario. Think of if you want like the sound of analog tape and that type of distortion, which is a different distortion and overload than a tube. So tapes and tubes sound, do different things. So it's, whatever it is, whatever sounds good, try different things. And just because it says tape or tube doesn't mean that you have to necessarily follow the paradigms that it's kind of designed after. So, you could have different settings and different functions all the time. Again, it's really what makes it sound good. Now, when we're talking imager, what the imager will do, and it's often kind of better for stereo tracks, maybe, so when you're taking a stereo mix and you want it to sound wider, that's what the imager plugin allows you to do. And in Wavelab, you could say, you could have different frequency ranges. Like when we come, and we'll show it here inside of Cubase as well, it's the same basic concept, but we go to our imager plugin, like you may want the high end frequencies to sound wide, but sometimes the low end frequencies, if they sound wide, kind of can, lose their sense of tightness in the mix. So you may want to take the high-end frequencies and make them sound wide, but the low frequencies not to sound wide. And that's what the imager plugin will allow you to do, is to separate different frequency bands to make those sound wider or narrower. So it's a great function. So often a good default choice is maybe a narrower width on bass and a wider width on like high mids and high frequencies. Okay. Right, so you see a question. When making a chord track from a guitar part, I've experienced that the chords are not in the same key, even though I made it from the track. Is there any reason for this? Check out of curiosity if it's not a sample rate mismatch. So if a file was recorded at like 44K, 44.1K, and you're playing it back at 48K, that might give results like you describe. But I've found it to be pretty accurate. But maybe it's different sample rates within the same project, and that could cause, like, if you notice it's kind of like maybe a half step off, but not exactly, that could cause a lot of irregularities in the chord analysis. Okay. All right, so always wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. We hope you did okay during the storms. I was thinking about you. All right. All right, so Gerald Ely asked, he says, interested in immersive virtual studio, and it doesn't have a profile for my headphones, but since it's a room simulator, does that matter? So it gives you kind of an overview of most of the headphones, but the critical thing that the Immerse does is it will actually, you could take a picture of your ear and get an HRTF profile, and that will make it more accurate. So it's not necessarily designed to work with 14,000 headphone types, which end up often being something like a basic EQ change. But you could definitely try the trial version and see how it works for you. But I think it's not as critical with kind of the technology where the room has been modeled, and they're kind of using more of the shape of your ear to do that rather than a specific headphone. All right, so we see Jay from Secret Studios says, I've been trying different setups recently and noticed that there are some times when the Cubase Studio Audio I/O settings are missing newly set up buses and saved prefs. Not sure why. So generally, each project itself will contain the different I/O buses. So if you saved a project with different audio connections, for your inputs and outputs. So say right now, this project, my inputs is set to one stereo in. If I open a different project, so say I open up Amos Moses here, and I open this up, and because this was tracked in studio in a project, when we go to our inputs here, we'll go to our audio connections. We can see all the inputs that were that were defined within the project. So the project itself can contain the input and output settings and what's defined as the settings for inputs and outputs, and not necessarily Cubase itself. So that information is kind of carried over in the project. All right, always wonderful to see Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. He's usually so good in getting his questions in early, so glad you can make it today. Okay. All right, so always wonderful to see Bruce Bruton checking in from Simi Valley, California. And he has a question. Can you show how to use markers? Okay, so if we have, let's say, a marker track here. So I'm going to right-click and add a marker track, and we can have up to 10 different marker tracks. So we'll come over, we'll add this. All right, so while we're playing, if you wanted to, let's say, just like say, okay, maybe I wanted to drop a marker. Say that's the start. So I wanted to set maybe like markers for like the song arrangement. So say, okay, second part of intro. And then I want this to be verse 1. So say I'll just rewind a little bit and say. So we could just kind of drop markers, and let's say I just hear like, oh, that's a bad mistake. And so what we could do, so there's two different types of markers. One is a cycle marker. So if I have a range selected here, I could add a cycle marker, and that defines kind of like this, you know, that amount of time, and that could be used for exporting. And if we wanted to navigate to different markers, you could just hit like B or N, and then you could just navigate to a particular marker, whether it's song structure, you know, blown notes by the bass player, you know, and again, you could have up to 10 marker tracks to, you know, quickly navigate. And if we see the marker track inspector window, if we come over here, you could just type in the description. So even after you're playing, and one tip you could do if you wanted to, you know, if you hit the tab key, you can go back to different fields, but you could also just come here, hit the down key, and type in your marker descriptions, verse 1, verse 2. So it allows you to quickly navigate to different parts of a project. And again, you could have multiple marker tracks, maybe one for edits, one for the arrangement, one for vocal fixes, where like as you're listening to it, you just want to drop those markers and say, okay, we need to go back and revisit this part. The markers allow you to define that part in the project and to navigate quickly to it. And glad you can make it on today, Bruce. All right, so we just see, hi Greg, thank you for your great videos. Is there any way of transposing an entire project including audio and MIDI, obviously excluding drum tracks? Cheers, Dave. All right, so this would work, you know, there's a number of ways of doing this. One way is just to add a track, and there's a transpose track. So we'll just come directly here to the transpose track. So let's say we're playing along. And like at this point in the project, I wanted to transpose. So let's say, okay, I just want to come right here. Let me just make this larger so we can all see it a little better. So, you know, once we have, let me just, so I can just come here and say, okay, we're going to transpose your particular tracks. So once we come here, we say, okay, let's transpose it up 2. So as we do this, now if I don't want my drums to transpose, so I could, you know, which is often the case, especially MIDI, because it would change, like, you know, the note assignments for the different drum samples. But we could select those, and where we see there's a follow transpose, global transpose function. Here I could just choose this to be independent. So as soon as I transpose, my drums can be the same. But if I wanted to say, okay, let's go down -2. My drums will stay the same pitch, and my pitched instruments will automatically change. So this way, if you wanted to exclude events from being transposed, just select them here and go to global transpose, set it to independent. Otherwise, you could just right click, add a transpose track, and then you could transpose to your heart's delight. All right, just reading through comments. All right, so we see how to export audio mixdown. Okay, so what we could do is I will just take just a small section of this. So let's say we have everything as we like, and we want to now, completely export our mixdown of this. So you want to set the range of what you're going to export with the left and right locators. And a good way of doing this is you could, if you wanted to include everything, hit Control or Command plus the letter A, like a select all command, and hit the letter P. And that will set the left and right locators around all of the selected parts. We want to go to File, to export audio mixdown. We could choose to, if we wanted to, take all of our multi-track files with virtual instruments, all of their effects and automation, and export just a single file. We could come over here and we'd probably do a single file and choose the stereo output. At this point, we'll give it a name. And at this point, we could just say after export, if we wanted to import like straight back into the same project, which I always like to do, we could just say export audio, and it will go through now and create our mixdown. We could put it into its own separate folder, and now this is our mixdown file, and it's stored directly within the project. So if you do something like that, if you're playing back the project, maybe mute that track so it's not playing back with the individual elements. So again, go to your file menu to export audio mixdown and choose a stereo out. And then you could also do like a batch export. So if you want to take all your files in the project and make equal length audio files, if you need to send it to someone else for basically creating stems for them to mix, you could do that as well. Okay. All right, so let me just, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. All right, let me find my spot. All right. All right, so you see, what's the difference between Cubase and Nuendo? So, we can think of Nuendo as having all the features of Cubase plus additional functionality, like very specialized tools and tasks. So if you wanted to work with game audio production, it's going to, interact with audio kinetics wise. If it's going to if you're doing lots of dialogue replacement for recording, there's ADR functionality. There's going to be more extensive Dolby Atmos support. There's reconforming, some additional automation modes. It has network collaboration. So if you're working in a facility like, often a post-production or game audio production where maybe 4 or 5 people are working on the same project and you're splitting up, you do the dialogue, you do the sound effects, you do this. You could have a networked Each person could be working on the same project simultaneously over a network and have all the changes be uploaded. So those are some of the different functions that are in Nuendo that aren't in Cubase, but Nuendo will have all the features of Cubase plus those very specialized tasks that often cost thousands and thousands of dollars to get implemented and may not be compatible with your workstation of choice in the long run. All right, it looks like it's Bruce Bruton's birthday today. Happy birthday. Thanks for joining us on your birthday. We hope you have a great day of celebration. All right, so we see from Elijah Brown, how do you do that rainbow themed colored skin? Just need a recap, please. So if it's coming over, if you, like for the color skins, just go to your preferences and go to user interface to color schemes, and then we could just choose different functions, different colors for different functions here. All you have to do is so if I want to change the project area background, just double click and then you get kind of the color picker that you could choose from. So once again, preferences, user interface, color schemes, you could expand for grid lines and double click, and then you have the color wheel options that you can select different colors and shades. So let me know if that's what you wanted to see, Elijah. All right, so we have IngX just saying yo, so thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Sable Winters just says bingo, that helps tremendously. I'm doing it right now. Thanks, Greg. Welcome. Thanks for your questions and being on the live stream. All right, so you see kind of further clarification from Matt Elston. This is about the, I think the chord track says you recreated the situation I didn't explain well. The problem is I have the chord track set using monitor tracks. The Hallian track in question isn't set to monitor, and the inspector has no setting selected on chord section, but it's still playing like I had a monitor switched on under the umbrella of monitor all tracks. If you change chord track to a single other Hallian track, the issue doesn't occur. All right, so let me see if I have that project still up so we don't have to recreate it. Don't think that's it. Okay, so I think this is the project. Okay, so let's say as we're, all right. So we say this is set to use monitor tracks, all right. Okay, so the problem is I have the chord track set to use monitor tracks. The Hallian track in question isn't set to monitor, and the inspector it has no settings selected on the chord section, but it's still playing. All right, so let's say I just want FM piano and organ to play, or FM piano and, yeah, we'll do FM piano like the Rhodes and Okay. Okay. Okay, so it's not set to monitor, and the inspector has no setting selected on the chord section, but is still playing like it had the monitor switch turned on under the umbrella of monitor all tracks. If you change the chord track to a single Halligan track, the issue doesn't occur. All right, so I'm going to switch this over to the Halligan Sonic, which I think is just the piano sound. And now we'll switch back to use monitor tracks. So this is just that sound. We'll use the monitor tracks, which is the FM piano. Okay, so the question is, the Halligan. Okay, the problem is I have the chord track set to use monitor tracks. The Halligan track in question isn't set to monitor. So so this Halligan track isn't set to monitor. When I come here, so we'll just call this our piano. Okay, so that isn't set to monitor. And the inspector, it has no setting selected with on chord section, but it's still playing like it had the monitor switched on under the umbrella of the monitor all tracks. If you change the chord track to a single other Halligan track, the issue doesn't occur. All right, so come here. All right, so I have this set to, and let's change it to the synth. And the synth, we don't have it set to monitor. Now we go back to use monitor tracks. Alright, if you change the chord track to a single other Halligan track, the issue doesn't occur. So let me know, Matt, if I'm misunderstanding. Now, one thing, just out of curiosity, is if it is, if you're doing like a multi-timbral, let me know also if, like, when you open up your Halligan, if you see, if you have like track 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like multiple instruments within this single instance of Halligan, and maybe it's sharing a communal output, like a common output. So let me know if it's different instances of Halligan or one single instance of Halligan. All right. Okay, so we see I never really dived into markers in Cubase. I'm watching and learning, so hopefully you learn a new tip or trick there. All right, so we are granted with the pleasure of Michael Pierce's soup recipe. So he's thinking of an Italian classic pasta dish, cacio e pepe, cheese and pepper. Why not soup it? Though I guess never serve it to an Italian. I'll check later. So sounds good. All right, so we see what are remote quick controls and what's the difference between this and normal quick controls. All right, so it used to be when we would go to an instrument let me just go to my quick controls here. So that we had track quick controls. So let's say I have an audio track here. I could have quick controls for like volume pan, low cut, high cut, and frequencies, and sends 1 and 2. And then if we wanted to have a separate fader box that was set up for instrument quick controls, when we go to open up a particular instrument, that we could at this point, let's just come over here, we open up the instrument, that we could have the quick controls do, you know, whatever functions we wanted on an instrument. So we could have 2 different like fader unit boxes a lot of people would use, one for audio, one for instrument. But now with the MIDI remote, we have something called focus quick controls. So when I come over, let's get my nano control here, and we have this set to focus quick controls so that my encoders here are doing quick controls. Now this way I could have one set, and I have an audio, let's say I go to my organ track, and that organ is selected. My quick controls are working directly with that. I go to an audio track, and now since that is selected, my quick controls are working with that. But let's say on this audio track I have an insert. All right, so I want to go to, let's say, the VST bass amp, and now that the instrument is selected and this is the active window, the quick controls are automatically controlling the parameters of the instrument. I select the track. We now have the track quick controls. I go to an instrument. So these the remote control focus quick controls can just quickly navigate based upon what is selected. So that way you could use kind of one bank of 8 faders or knobs and be able to utilize that for whatever kind of the active window is. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see for Secret Studios, is there a Zoom session this afternoon? So I had some family stuff I had to do this morning, and I got back like 5 minutes before a meeting that lasted to 15 minutes before the live stream. So I didn't get a chance to set up the Zoom. So we discussed it, and we're going to try to do the Zoom next Friday. So we'll do it then. So. All right. All right, so we see Soundlord asks, will Loop Mash, Prologue, /Mystic, /Spectre be back in the future? I'm Nuendo 12 user and love it, but would be crazy nice to have those things again. So one of the things was that those plugins weren't going to be capable of being updated to work on Apple Silicon. So that was one of the reasons, and they were going to be developed further by the people that had developed them. So if you're on the Windows platform where being Apple Silicon native may not be a huge priority or concern for you, you could probably Google, it's not officially sanctioned, but you could probably Google a way to copy a file from Nuendo 11 to Nuendo 12 and have those plugins show up. So there is a little bit of a hack to make it work. So. And they will require the USB-E licenser, I think, to work. All right, wonderful to see Soren checking in from Sweden. Glad you can make it. Slowly catching up here. Always great to see Tiago from Brazil. All right, so we see just a follow-up question from Neil Conway. It says, I recall that we could mark tracks inactive and thereby marking the plugins within them inactive. Assuming that this is true, does the audio still pass through? So if the tracks are inactive, audio is not going to pass through the track. So that's kind of shutting off all aspects of that particular track. So if you right-click and say, okay, we have this organ patch, and what I want to do is to disable that selected track. So that's going to disable a track. It's not going to pass audio. So if you wanted to disable plugins, like insert plugins on tracks, you could have the audio playback. I think you have to disable inserts one at a time. But that will, if the insert plugins are disabled, then they won't take processing in the audio playback. But when you do it at the track level, the track won't pass audio because the audio part of the track, the track which contains the audio and the effects is being disabled. So we'll just enable that track quickly. All right, so we see from Dad Max asks, is it possible to select a track and the included region is selected too? So I'm not sure what the included region is, but if let me just jump back to different project here. So there is a function where if I select a particular event, that the track is selected as well. So there's a preference for that. So I think if we go to editing, it's like track selection follows event selection. So once that is turned on, we could select a particular event and the track is selected as well. But let me just reread that, make sure I'm understanding it. Is it possible to select a track on the included region is selected too? So let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish. So if I come here, select the events, the tracks, and again, we could do that by going to your preferences to track selection follows event selection under editing. Always wonderful to see Graham Witcher from Royal Wooten Bassett. Thanks for joining us this Friday afternoon, Friday evening for you. All right, just reading through comments. All right. All right, great to see Roger Cabo on, or Cabo, I'm not sure. Maybe you can let me know. I won't feel bad if I mispronounce your name, Roger. Sorry. All right, so we see Neil Conway. How do I meld European industrial, techno, and melodic, like Tangerine Dream examples? Greatly appreciated. I was dreaming, hallucinating. Is there a difference in thought of it? So check out some of Paul Haslinger's compositions. He was obviously a member of Tangerine Dream, longtime Cubase guy. So, but his soundtracks are really interesting. All right, so I think we had some questions that were mailed in, so let me get to some of those before we run out of time. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. All right, let me just find my document here. Okay, what are the benefits of punch points? Okay, so one of the things that, a lot of punches in previous versions of Cubase were set on the left and right locators. So if I wanted to punch in a particular file, so let's say if I'll just add an audio track here. All right, so let's say our musician wasn't having a great take on this particular file. So we could hit I and O to activate punch in and punch out, and we could do that directly here, punch in, punch out. So if we wanted to do just a small section of the audio, we'll just select the audio, and as we play, when it gets to this section, it'll punch in recording. We get to the end of this section, what it'll do is punch out. Now sometimes we may want to decouple the cycle range for the performer from the range that's actually happening on the punch in, punch out. So let's say we come here, I want like 2 measures, and I'm just going to turn off my punch in out. So if your Cubase records automatically, unexpectedly, one of the things you could do is make sure that your punch in and punch out are disabled. So but let's say I want to do I want the musician to hear 2 full bars for context, but I want just a small section to be punched in. So I can say, let's activate this. So we're going to have the musician loop to these 2 bars, but I just want to catch maybe perhaps a single note. So this is when we go to our transport, and we would go to punch points, and we would say, I want to just do just this part right here. And we would say go to transport to punch points, and I would say set punch points to the left and right locator. So once that's done, we'll see these little red triangles appear. So now that we do this, we'll just say punch in. It punches in just that section and loops and punches in just that one section again. So this way the person that's being recorded could have kind of more musical context to better their performance, and at that point just simply take just a small section so you could decouple the left and right locators for playback from the actual punch position. So an easy way of doing this is just to use the range tool and go to your transport, go to punch points, and set the punch points from the range. You could, set the punch in points manually if you wanted to. I always like the range. So, this is the note that needs to be fixed. So we'll set our punch points directly to that range and just have them play along. So maybe you don't want the musician to know what you're actually trying to fix. So you say, just come over here. Yeah, just, play along with this again. And, at that point, they may not know exactly which part, because sometimes you're like, oh, I messed this part up and I'm going to get wigged out in my head as I'm recording. That now you could just simply just play the whole section and punch in. Just say, yeah, just play along, listen, and then do kind of a subtle punch in, punch out without the performer realizing. All right, next question we had. Greg, would Cubase 13/14 include a writing prompt? I would like to see that just like in Photoshop beta for music, to get any style, EDM, pop, rock. So, I haven't, we obviously can't really share future, features. But I think a lot of times if people are expecting okay, just go to Cubase and, hit a button and generate an EDM track, that may not be a valuable use of AI, because everyone could probably write the same exact song, and then do you get ownership? Do you get a copyright if the AI has written it, or other people have plugged in the same parameters and got the same exact results? So, I would say, arguably you could say that there's a lot of kind of artificial intelligence stuff within Cubase, and especially SpectraLayers Pro 10. But I'm not sure if we'll see for a while. I think that there's some academic stuff going on, like, that some of my composer friends, like, big movie composer friends are kind of, think is getting pretty good for like doing YouTube background music for like a YouTube video, but not for score, but they recognize that it's advancing quickly. So we'll see what happens in the future. All right, next question. Hi, Greg. Sometimes when I open a plugin window, it's too large for my screen. I can resize it, but after X amount of time, it reverts back to being too big. Is there a way around this? I've tried resizing it and saving as default preset, but this doesn't work. I'm running Windows 10. Thank you. So often you may run into scenarios like this where the plugin window is too big when the plugin Windows, the plugin is maybe not high DPI aware. So if you're running like right now I'm running 1920 by 1080. So, and if I was running this resolution at 4K, it basically means that it's 4 times the resolution. So you would say 7680 by 4120. But each pixel that you see is 4 dots to make it clearer. But sometimes plugin windows aren't necessarily set up. A lot of plugins aren't set up for high DPI. So what you could do on a Windows version, I'm running Mac, but we'll take a look at it. I think we could show it here. You could try to toggle the high DPI settings. So let's say if we are here, go to your general, and then you could try to enable high DPI, and that may fix it. And there's also different system scaling options. So on the Windows platform, go to your preferences under editing and go to general and see if you toggle the high DPI, if that kind of resolves the issue for you. And then, but it's a good chance it's going to be maybe the plugin isn't set up to work in high DPI, even though your Cubase, your graphics card, your display is. That, sometimes, and it took us a while to redesign every single window and function and every plugin to be, high DPI compatible. It's a lot of work, but that's probably going to be the issue. All right, so we got a question. Hi, Greg. First, thanks for all you're doing for us Cubase users. Thanks. So you're welcome. I need to send a part to a customer, and I want her to hear the listen bus, the L in the mixer, the sound, basically going through the control room. Therefore, I need a mix down in listen mode, or see as a wider question, mix down of the sound I have in the control room. So generally, the control room is set to just be a monitoring stage. The settings and plugins and processing that we have in the control room is intended for the control room and not to be necessarily embedded or applied directly into the mixer. Now, what you might be able to do is, depending on your audio interface, an easy way to kind of do this, and especially if you have a digital connection, is, as you play, take the output from the control room to 2 inputs on your audio interface and just play and record at the same time. So you could capture it that way. Some audio interfaces, like the Steinberg interfaces, will also have a function called loopback. And what the loopback allows you to do is to take the output that's going out of the audio interface, and that could send it to often it's used for like Zoom or OBS. It's just like a little utility that takes the output of what you're hearing and sends that to like a standard Windows driver. So if you're on Windows, that you could loop it, and I think you could do it on Mac OS as well. But then you could take the output of the sound of the control room and loop it back to capture and you might have to capture it in a different program, but it could be captured that way. But probably the easiest way, because the control room is kind of only on the output stage. And even if you took, one thing that you might be able to do is to take the outputs of that and feed it. If you in your control room, if you have this set up, so let's say we go to our audio connections, we go to our control room. You could have an external input. So you could say, okay, I just want this to be like a 1/2-inch analog deck. So we could take 2 inputs. So if it's patched, through just a cable, if you need to do this like just once, I would probably just patch an audio cable from the outputs to 2 inputs and just record everything and capture it that way. That may be the simplest way to kind of include the settings and what you're hearing in the control room, to Cubase. So you might be able to also, something to think about, which just kind of crossed my mind, was maybe utilizing VST Connect. If you have VST Connect Pro and you have 2 systems, you could transmit the audio from the control room out, but that might be not really any benefits over probably just patching the analog cable from the outs to the ins. So, okay, so we have a question. Hello, I'm dealing with a problem at the moment. I accidentally exported a MIDI file as type 0. And then I deleted the project. So 4 different instruments, drums, bass, and 2 synths, are now merged into a single MIDI, which is impossible to work with. Any ideas on how to analyze the MIDI file and separate the different instruments so I can continue working on my project? Or is there a way to convert the file to type 1? Any recommendations would be appreciated. All right, so there's 2 ways of approaching this. One is, like, if it's not working, you could take that particular MIDI file and probably set it to, for MIDI channel, try setting it to MIDI channel any. All right, now once you have, let's say we have a number of files here, so I'll just put some notes in. Let me just... Okay, so let's say I'm going to put these on MIDI channel 1. I'll add some other notes here. This little cluster, I want these to be on MIDI channel 2. MIDI channel 3. All right, so just make sure I'm doing this right. And let's do MIDI channel 4 here. All right, so now we have multiple MIDI notes on channels 1 through 4, all within one particular event here. All right, so let me just elongate this particular event so we could see everything. Okay, so all right, so as we work with this, we're going to see our different MIDI. So one of the things is you could just import the file, and then there's a preference in Cubase. So we could say, let's go to preferences to import MIDI file, or go to MIDI file and import, and you could choose to auto dissolve format 0. So ironically, there's 2 types of MIDI files. There's MIDI file type 1 and type 0. So type 0 is all a single track and it's often compatible with hardware sequencers. Type 1 is on multiple tracks. So if you import it with this checked, it's automatically going to split it. But another method that you could do is to simply select the event, go to your MIDI menu, and you'll see dissolve part. and we want to separate by channels. And now I'll just say process, and now MIDI channel 1, 2, and 3 will all be on their own particular channels, just that easily. So that would be all you'd have to do. So take that particular file, go to MIDI and choose dissolve part, or go to your preferences and under MIDI file on import, just say, import it one more time and just say auto dissolve type 0 MIDI files. Most software sequencers, it's you'd probably want MIDI file 1 type. All right, let me jump back to our live questions. Thanks for sending the questions in. Again, you could send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. Just find where I left off. All right. So I just see, hey all, I was wondering what I could do to get the Hallian's preview function to work. I have to drop a preset into the project to hear it, but none of the presets will sound in Media Bay on the right. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so let's come over here. All right, let's say we want to go to VST Instruments. Let's go to Hallian 7, and I just want to come here. All right. So realize that when you do this, it may have to load up the instrument in the background. But as we just kind of select different frequencies, and let's say, okay, I just want to go back to a different instrument. So let's say flux instead. So now we'll see, once you see the keyboard pop up, at that point you could just come over and let's see, maybe I might have to do something in flux, but let's say anima. And let's make sure I have the correct instrument loaded. So, but once you're here, you can just, now also once you have, let's say, an instrument in Hallian loaded, so let's say as we come here, we're just going to load this up. All right, so now let's say, but now that I'm in Hallian, I could just come over here, and I think that we could just, so try, and then but some of the instruments may just kind of load up when you see this. So that's previewing. Hang on, my son has a quick question for me. All right, sorry about that. So, but just come over here, and, once you have like a particular instrument loaded up, you can, and that's without, so as soon as you come over and just click on different sounds, that you could load them up and kind of preview like that. All right. reading through comments here. Thanks for all the great questions. We see also it's Bruce Bruton's sister's birthday. They share a birthday, 5 years apart. Still reading through comments here. So a lot of discussion on different artists. All right, so let's see if there's any other questions that come in. You see, New Jersey Buddha Man says I was getting the preview until the last update, 1207. So it seems to be working for me, but you know, check to see if it's like every instrument or only particular instruments that you're not getting the preview on. So see if there's any other questions. If not, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early. So once again, there's a good chance that we may not be doing a live stream on Tuesday, depending on my wife's kind of health situation. She may have to have kind of surgery done, so I will that will take priority over live stream, but we'll just see how that goes. So kind of look for the particular announcement if you go to the youtube.com/Cubase. You know, if there isn't a meeting posted, like a live stream posted, you can see it usually a couple days before. So we'll just kind of see how things evolve, and if she gets a slot for surgery, if she needs surgery, all that fun stuff with insurance. So that we have in the U.S. here. All right. Okay, so we see a quick question from David Henson. Hey Greg, how can I change the very tempo example 140 BPM for just one single MIDI track when the other MIDI tracks in the song should play at the same tempo 120 BPM? Okay, so let's just come over here real quick. All right, so let me just find a quick. All right, so let's say we have this drum event going on. Let's say we're at 120 beats a minute. All right, and let's say I just want to have another MIDI event, and let's say this is all right. So what I could do now is I'm going to change the tempo to 140 beats a minute for all of the projects. So now we'll see it play faster. Now I'm going to take this MIDI track, put it into time linear mode. So we see this little quarter note in the inspector, the top inspector pane. Put that into linear mode. Let's change my tempo back to 120 and hit enter. So now my keyboard part's playing at 140 and the drums are playing at 120. So again, just kind of speed up the tempo and tell, after you change the tempo, tell with that one track that you want to go back, that you want to put it into linear mode, and then simply go back to the original tempo, and then you could have MIDI tracks with two different tempos. Thank you for the kind words of my wife from Nick and Keith. Appreciate it. So we see, what is the Steinberg Help Support Center? I need some help, but I'll contact them there. Thanks. Man, aren't you tired of 4 hours of doing live? So, depending on the country, so sometimes when you're a distributor for Steinberg products, part of being a distributor is supporting your local market. So like in the United States, we have a separate support team than one that's in Germany. So depending where you live, you may have different support structures. Like Canada has a dedicated support guy, US has a dedicated support team, and they often kind of work in conjunction with the team based out of Hamburg. But if you're in Japan or Australia, you may have different support teams depending on where you live. But you could always ask questions here, and I guess answering questions for 4 hours isn't the worst thing. I used to work construction when I was in high school and college, where I would move houses piece by piece, and I was college boy number 2 was my name. Doing that for 8 hours in 100-degree heat, doing this for 4 hours is a piece of cake. And, we get to have such wonderful people we get to interact with. So it's a joy to do these. So. All right. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions. If not, we'll wrap up just a couple minutes early. So once again, look for the announcements. I'm hoping everything will be back for Friday's live stream and kind of back to normal. And we will do our Zoom meetup hopefully next Friday. All right. So, but I appreciate everyone's, kind thoughts, and also appreciate everyone spending part of your evening, afternoon, morning, with us learning more about Cubase. Okay, so we see Michael Jensen, just a quick question. It says, hello, Greg, just bought VST Pro. It's fantastic, but I can't load or save presets. So it depends where, there's a lot of different presets. So if you have a track preset, you could just come over here to load a track preset. If it's an instrument, often you can just come to within the instrument itself, and you'll see the ability to just at the very top here with like the built-in plugins, just to load and save presets right there. All right, so I guess with that, we'll see if there's any more questions. But again, I appreciate everyone spending part of your day learning more about Cubase and Steinberg products. And I hope that everyone stays safe and healthy. And I guess we're out of questions. Okay, so we see Michael Jensen just saying it's a mixer preset in VST Connect. So a lot of times, let's take a look at VST Connect real quick. So sometimes like the mixer, may be, let's see if we could, have another computer connected to access the mixer. But often I'll check this out for the next live stream. But often kind of that data is on the other, if it's like the settings for the performer, those settings are actually kind of on their system. And you're kind of just remotely accessing it. So let me see if I have VST Connect Performer on here. If it's maybe saved in the performer side. So, but a lot of these, I haven't saved a preset with this. Yeah, so you may not be able to save a preset, but I think most of the time if it's kind of left, that it will maintain the settings, but I'll play around with it more when I have two systems connected. All right. All right, so we see just a quick question. I think we can get it in. When I do automation on some instruments, the automation does not show up on the automation lane. Any reason why? So if you let me know, like if there's a particular instrument, but let's say if I come over to this instrument, so let's come here and I automate, so I'm not sure if you're automating within the instrument itself. So let's say if we come over to edit and, as we do this, and one thing you could do is if you hit F6 to get to the automation settings, like as you write parameters, one of the settings you could have is to reveal the parameter on write. So, it could be sometimes, check to see, and one of the things you could do if there's a particular parameter, especially with properly written VST3 plugins, you could right click on it and say, show like this parameter automation track. And that could just show you that particular automation lane for that. But if you let me know like a particular instrument, that would be helpful. All right, so with that, we're just out of time. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions, and thank you for the thoughts from my wife. It's really appreciated. And we will see everyone hopefully next week, Friday, and we'll plan to do a Zoom meeting then. Thank you so much for all the wonderful questions, and everyone have a wonderful weekend. And if you're in the U.S., please have a wonderful Labor Day weekend and enjoy the time off. Take care. Thank you.